So one of the things that we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to use Mason as my amazing model, is a prompting hierarchy. A prompt is something that we as adults do, whether it's verbal, whether it's a gesture, or a physical assistance. A prompt is something that we do in order to elicit a response for a child to do something. And two important things to keep in mind when doing the prompting hierarchy is that, one, we need to allow time for kids to process each step. So instead of firing directions one after the other, pick up the chalk, draw a circle, erase the circle, we want to make sure that before we give any sort of prompt, we always allow the child those 15-30 seconds to have that opportunity to process the information and to try to make that attempt on their own first before giving another prompt. The other thing to keep in mind that there is a hierarchy, and depending on who you talk to and depending on their experience, their training, the hierarchy might vary a little bit. So I'm going to explain it how I've personally been trained to use it. And we are going to talk about going from least restrictive prompts to most restrictive prompts. So the least restrictive thing that you can do while prompting a child to learn a skill is nothing at all. Them being completely independent on their own. You are not doing any assistance verbally, visually, physically. So if Mason decides to start drawing on the chalkboard all by himself, he is independent. Now, say Mason and I are working on some pre-writing strokes and I want him to draw a circle, and he's not doing it, and I gave him those 15-30 seconds to try to make that attempt on his own, and he just isn't getting there, I can do a gesture for him. So that could be me tapping on the chalkboard and trying to give him that cue, that visual cue. I'm pointing, I'm tapping to get his attention to get started on the activity. Now, if he's still not doing it, and I gave him that time to process the information, make that attempt, then I'll go down even further to give him a greater prompt, which would be a verbal prompt. Mason, draw a circle. Good job. So in this situation, Mason, he needed a verbal prompt in order to do the task. And if you provide any sort of praise, good job, excellent, perfect, praises are not prompts because they're not telling the child what to do. They're simply rewarding the behavior or the action that they did in order to hopefully keep it occurring more often in the future. So let's say that Mason didn't do his circle after I told him to draw it. I said, draw a circle, and he still didn't do it. What I could do next is model for him what I want. Draw a circle. So that would be a model. I did it myself. I showed him how to do it, and then I'm expecting him to do it. You did awesome, Mason, but we're going to pretend that this was really tricky for you and that you weren't able to do a circle. So say a child is still sitting, maybe not knowing how to do the circle, not executing that motion, even after being given the model. The next prompt on the hierarchy would be a partial physical. So that would be maybe a tap on Mason's elbow, maybe getting his hands started to start doing the circle, but not doing it for him. If still with a partial physical prompt, those taps on the elbows, little hand positioning, and he's still not able to do the task that I need him to do, the action, then the most restrictive prompt that we can provide a child is a full physical prompt, full assistance. So that would be me taking Mason's hand and him and I doing hand over hand, drawing a circle together. So that would be the full physical prompt. And in the ideal situation, what happens is that every time we're working on a skill is that you go through this hierarchy for every step of the way. We only used this prompting hierarchy for a single step to draw a circle, but you can implement this while doing multi-step activities, such as putting on your coats and shoes to leave the house where there's lots of things to do, for the hand washing sequence, or if you are doing puzzles and there you want to prompt for each and every puzzle piece that you're putting in a puzzle board. So what you would do in that situation is for each item, say Mason, I wanted him to put each piece of chalk inside of the bag. What would happen is Mason put the chalk in the bag. If he doesn't do it independently, then I give him those 15-30 seconds. And if he still doesn't do it, then I'll gesture. And he did it. Say if he didn't do it, what you do is you go down again in the prompting hierarchy. Mason put chalk in the bag. Good job. But Mason is just a really great model, but we're going to pretend that he's not doing it. So the next step would be modeling. I would show Mason that I'm putting in, put in, and then I would want him to put the chalk in. And then we would keep going until ultimately, if he still wasn't able to do it with the verbal prompts, with the modeling, with me gesturing for him to put in, then a full physical would be for him to do hand over hand and put it in the bag. In the ideal world, we try to work on fading away the prompts and the dependence on adult support, because as we grow up and go through life, we're not always directed to do this, put away that, close your backpack, put away your dishes, wash your hands. We want to teach skills and independence. And while we're giving that time to process between each time and something clicks and the child executes that action and whatever they're working on, those skills hopefully will carry over day after day, week after week, so that they move up in that hierarchy and they're not always so dependent on adult directions, but rather become independent in skills.